The river is older than the castle, older than the fields, older than the village clustered on its bank. It winds through the land if it has always known the way, carrying the reflection of sky upon its surface, carrying the stories of countless lives along its course. To sit by the river edge in the Middle Ages was to be close to life itself, for the river gave water, food, travel, and song. It was companion and guide, both useful and mysterious, both comfort and power. At dawn, the river lies hushed, its surface silver mist curling gently above it. Birds rise from the reeds, their wings brushing the air. A heron stands still, tall and gray, waiting for the flicker of a fish beneath. Across the far bank, cattle move slowly, their breath steaming, their hooves sinking in soft earth. The water flows past them, steady, unhurried, carrying the world onward. Children come barefoot to the shore, their laughter rising in the cool air. They skip stones across the smooth surface. They bend to watch minnows dart between pebbles. Their mothers stand nearby, washing linen upon the flat stones, beating cloth against the rock, their arms steady, their voices carrying in low song. The sound of the river is gentle but endless, a lapping against stone, a murmur it curls around a bend, a steady hush lie breath itself. To medieval ears it was both music and reminder. Its waters quenched thirst, turned mills, floated boats heavy with grain or timber. Yet always it carried more than myths, it carried mystery. For who could say where it began, where it ended, what spirits dwelled within its depths? In summer, the river is alive with work. Fishermen stand knee-deep, nets spread wide, their eyes fixed upon the shimmer beneath. When the net tight-ted, they pull together, their backs straining, their faces lit with hope. The catch flashes silver in the sun, scales gleaming, water spraying knees fish struggle. Some are taken for the Lord Tabe, others for the village, all salted, smoked, or stewed to sustain the household. Children wade nearby, shrieking at the cold, chasing minnows with cup-up hands, their laughter echoing. Dogs splash after sticks, their tails high, their barks ringing. On the banks, washerwomen work steadily. Their skirts are hitched high, their sleeves rolled, their strong arms slapping cloth against stone. Water splashes, suds froth, voices rise, they speak of news, of children, of the weather. The river is their meeting place, their shared labor, their rhythm. Each strike of cloth, each rinse, each ringing twist is part of the daily music, a steady the flow itself. In spring, the river floods, its waters rise, spreading into meadows, covering paths, carrying branches and leaves in swift currents. Villagers watch anxiously, their eyes on the fields, their voices low. Too much water and the grain will drown, too little and it will wither. The river gives, it takes, it pleases. Children marvel at its strength, at the rush and roar, though their mothers call them back from its edge. After the flood, the fields are rich, the soil dark and heavy, promising strong harvests. The river gift comes at a cost, but it sustains. In autumn, the river grows quieter, its surface golden beneath falling leaves. Fishermen mend their nets upon the bank, their hands defeft, their voices low. Women gather baskets of watercress from its shallows, their skirts brushing the wet grass. Children gather conkers from trees along its edge, their pockets bulging, their gaze noisy. The air smells of damp earth and smoke, the water reflecting the fire-bright leaves overhead. In winter, the river stills ice, gathers along its edge, delicate and sharp, spreading outward in sheets that crack beneath a thrown stone. Snow falls upon its banks, softening its lines, muting its sound. Yet even then, it moves beneath the ice, steady and sure, unseen but never gone. Boys creep upon the frozen surface, sliding and laughing, their mothers calling in warning. The river in winter is both play and danger, its beauty edged with risk. The river is also a road. Boats float upon its current, their oars dipping steady, their cargo piled high, grain from fields, timber from forests, barrels of ale, baskets of fish, all carried along the water. Merchants sit with cloaks drawn tight, their eyes on the bends ahead, their minds upon market. Pilgrims walk its banks, staffs tapping the earth, their voices lifted in song. Nobles ride across bridges, their horses stamping, their banners bright. Ferrymen tend from their boats, offering passage, their poles pushing deep into the current. Without the river, journeys would be longer, harder. With it, the world draws closer. The river is also a boundary. It marks the edge of fields, the line between villages, the border of lordships. Disputes rise he who may water their cattle, who may fish, who may cut reeds. Arguments ebb across its banks, voices raised, hands gesturing. Sometimes judgment is awed for, the steward walking solemnly to the shore, declaring what is right. Yet more often, the river simply flows, indifferent to human quarrels, carrying their anger away in its steady course. At dusk, the river glows with the last of the light. The water turns bronze, then silver, then dark. Birds settle in the reeds, their calls softening. Fishermen pull in their last nets, washerwomen gather their baskets. Children are called home, their laughter fading into the night. The surface reflects the first stars, trembling with their light, carrying the sky upon its back. A frog croaks, an owl calls, the water whispers endlessly. Those who linger feel its calm, its mystery, its unbroken rhythm. Pause and listen. Hear the steady hush of the water, the low voices upon its banks, the sudden splash of a fish. Smell the damp reeds, the sharp scent of watercress, the smoke of fires drifting from cottages nearby. Feel the smooth stone beneath your hand, the cool air upon your skin, the endless flow beneath your gaze. The river carries time itself, unbroken, unhurried. To sit by its edge is to be drawn into its rhythm, to be soothed, to be calmed. The people of the Middle Ages lived close to the river. They trusted it, feared it, relied upon it. They sang of it, told stories of spirits within it, prayed beside it. It gave life, it took life, it bound the land again. To even now you sit with we in memory, it flows steady, its song unchanged, its presence eternal. Rest fear by the river edge. Let its sound carry you, let its rhythm calm you, let its ancient flow roll you toward peace, for the river has always known the way, and it always will. Step with me now away from the river edge, leave behind its steady hush, its silver surface, its gentle music. A narrow path leads outward, its earth dark and soft beneath your feet, its edges lined with brambles and nettles. Follow it, for it winds toward the forest, vast, deep, mysterious. The first trees stand apart, scattered across meadow and hedgerow, their branches wide, their trunks sturdy. But soon they thicken, drawing close, their crowns touching overhead, their roots tangling beneath. The light shifts here. Sunlight filters through leaves, turning the air green, dappling the earth with shifting patterns. The forest is another world, apart from field and village, older, wilder, stranger. The sounds chain too. The chatter of voices fades, the clatter of tools is left behind. Here the air is filled with birdsong, with the drumming of woodpeckers, with the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. A squirrel scampers upward, its claws scratching bark, its tail flicking. A dove coos, soft and steady. Somewhere deeper, a stag cracks branches beneath its antlers, unseen but present. The forest breathes in its own rhythm, slow, ancient, alive. In spring, the forest is bright with blossom, bluebells carpet the ground in shimmering waves, their heads nodding in the breeze. Wild garlic spreads its white flowers glowing in shadow, its scent sharp and clean. Sap rises in trees, leaves unfurl fresh and tender, birds weave nests high in branches, children sent to gather firewood pause to marvel, their baskets forgotten, and they chase butterflies, their laughter mingling with birdsong. Women gather herbs comfrey for wounds, foxglove for the heart, nettles for soup. The forest offers gifts if one knows whiz to look. In summer, the canopy thick hid, the air grows heavy with warmth. The forest hums with bees, with midges, with the constant drone of insect life. Paths grow dim, the light muted by layers of green. Hunters move quietly, their bows ready, their dogs straining at leashes. The deer are quick, the bows fierce, the rabbits clever. The forest is no easy lauder, it demands skill, patience, courage. Autumn transforms the forest into gold and fire. Leaves fall thick upon the ground, crunching beneath boots. Rustling animals scurry, acorns drop, filling the earth with food for pigs turned loose to forage. Their snouts root through leaves, their grunts aches, their keepers calling to them. Nuts are there, hazel, chestnut, walnut stored for winter. Mushrooms rise after rain, their shapes strange and many-colored, and nourishing and deadly. Villagers move carefully, baskets in hand, eyes sharp for what may heal and what may harm. Winter strips the forest bare. Branches stand stark against gray skies. Paths crunch with frost. Streams run low and dark. Snow drifts among roots, muffling every sound. Yet even then life stirs, hares bounding white against white, foxes leaving tracks, owls calling in the night. Firewood is there in great bundles, carried out by weary backs, for without it hearths would grow cold. Men fell trees, their axes ringing, the sound echoing for miles. Logs are hauled by oxen, their breath steaming, their hooves sinking deep. The forest in winter is harsh, yet it gives, for wood is warmth, and warmth is life. The forest is not only resource, but mystery. In the Middle Ages, it was a place of stories, of legends, of fears. People whispered of spirits in the glades, of green men who watched from shadows, of saints who walked among the trees, of outlaws who made campfires deep within. Children were warned not to wander too far, lest they meet wolves or strangers or worse. Yet they wandered still, curiosity stronger than caution, their hearts thumping with both fear and wonder. For the forest held beauty well led danger. Lovers met beneath its branches, their voices hushed, their hands clasped. Pilgrims paused in clarion, praying before wooden crosses raised beside paths. Hunters rested by streams, their faces warmed by sunlight, their ears filled with the murmur of water. Woodcutters sat to eat their bread and cheese, their axes leaned against trunks, their bodies weary but content. The forest offered both solitude and company, both silence and song. Listen, meet a while, hear the creak of branches in the wind, the scurry of leaves across the ground, the sudden call of a jay. Smell the damp moss, the sharpness of pine, the sweetness of wildflowers. Feel the rough bark beneath your hand, the spring of earth beneath your step, the cool shadow upon your face. The forest surrounds you, vast and deep, yet also close, protective, sheltering. For medieval people, the forest was never simply backdrop. It was part of their world, shaping their lives, feeding their fears, inspiring their tales. It gave wood for homes, fuel for fires, herbs for healing, meat for hunger. It also gave stories of knights riding on lonely quests, of hermits living in silence, of saints preaching to birds, of spirits hiding in shadow. To walk in the forest was to walk both in reality and in imagination, each step carrying weight. As evening falls, the forest darkens swiftly. Shadows stretch, the light turns copper, the birds fall silent one by one. Owls call, bats flicker gurs, unseen creatures move in the undergrowth, paths blur, landmarks fade, the air grows cool, travelers quicken their steps, eager to reach village or road before night closes in. Yet for those who linger, the forest at dusk holds its own magic. The hush, the glimmer of starlight through branches, the sense of being small beneath something vast. Pause with me, night deep. Hear the silence broken only by the drip of water, the rustle of a fox. Smell the earth cooling, the damp leaves, the faint smoke of a distant fire. Feel the dark enfold you, the forest vast, endless, eternal. It is mystery and shelter, danger and gift, and in its presence you find both awe and rest. The narrow, winding tracks that thread through meadow, wood, and hill. They are neither roads of stone nor broad highways, but simple ways beaten by countless feet, hooves, and cartwheels. To walk them is to follow the same steps as shepherds, pilgrims, merchants, hunters, and children have taken for generations. They link village to village, farm to field, castle to chapel, but they also lead into wilder places where the world grows quiet and the land seems older than memory. The paths are humble. Some are little more than strips of bare earth, pressed down by feet, edged with grass and nettles. Others are lined with hedges, thick with hawthorn and blackberry, humming with bees in summer, glowing red with berries in autumn. In wet weather they grow muddy, boots sinking deep, carts stuck fast, children splashing with laughter. In frost they grow hard, white with rime, crunching beneath each step. They are never still, always changing with the season, yet always familiar, always there. Shepherds walk them at dawn, driving flocks of sheep toward pasture. Their staffs tap the ground, their dogs dart and circle. Their voices carry low, calling, urging, whistling. The bells upon the sheep tinkle faintly. The flock move in a soft, shuffling mass, wool brushing wool. The shepherd walks steadily, his cloak drawn tight, his eyes upon the horizon. For him, the path is daily life. His companion as much as his dog, his guide as much as his memory. Merchants vow the same tracks, the carts creaking, the mules trudging patiently. They carry sacks of grain, barrels of ale, bundles of wool, bolts of cloth. Their voices call encouragement, their hands steady reins, their eyes wary for ruts or thieves. They travel not alone, but in company, for the wild is wide and safety lies in numbers. At night they camp by the path, lighting small fires, their goods covered with tops, their bodies weary but their talk lively. In the morning they rise with the sun, the wheels turn once more, and the path stretches onward. Pilgrims tread the paths with staffs and sandals, their cloaks patched, their badges glinting in sunlight. Their voices rise in hymns, their feet soar but steady, their eyes lifted toward distant shrines. They beg alms at villages, they share bread with strangers, they tell tales of saints and miracles. The path is their prayer, each step an offering, each mile a devotion. In groups or alone, they move onward, trusting the path to lead them to holy places. Children know the paths too. They run barefoot along them in summer, their laughter carrying, their games spilling across the way. They pick flowers from the verges, chase butterflies, gather berries. In autumn, they carry baskets of apples, their voices calling as they race one another home. In winter, they trudge with firewood, their cheeks red, their arms aching, yet their songs rising in cheer. For them, the paths are playground, duty, and adventure all at once. The wild along the paths is alive, meadows open with tall grasses swaying, alive with crickets and larks. Woods close in with shadow and scent, damp earth beneath, moss soft upon stones. Streams cross the way, their water sparkling, their stones slippery, forcing travelers to pause, to wade, to balance upon fallen logs. Hills rise steep and green, paths winding upward, views stretching wide at their crest. Valleys dip, paths curling downward, the air cooler, the shade deeper. Each bend offers change, each turn reveals new sights. In spring, the paths are edged with primroses, violets, and daisies. Lambs bleat from meadows, calves stumble on unsteady legs, birds dart across the hedges, rain falls fawn, leaving puddles bright spade mirrors, children splashing, wheels carving ruts. The air smells of earth, of blossom, of life renewed. Travelers breathe deep, their steps lighter, their hearts lifted by the season. In summer, the paths grow dusty, the air thick with heat, the grasses tall and buzzing with insects. Travelers shade their eyes, drink deeply from skins, rest beneath trees whose breezes stir. Dogs pant, tongues lolling, sheep press close to shade. Pilgrims sing softly, their voices low, steadying their pace against the glare. At night, stars blaze above the paths, fireflies flicker in hedgerows, the air hums with warm life. In autumn, leaves fall thick, carpeting the paths in gold, in red, in brown. The air smells of apples and smoke, carts creak beneath heavy loads of harvest. Nuts are there along verges, children pockets bulged, their faces sticky with fruit. Travelers wear cloaks, their breath visible in chill air, their steps quickening toward shelter. Dusk falls earlier each day, yet the beauty of the paths glows brightest now, lit by autumn fire, rich with abundance. In winter, the paths grow hard and narrow. Snow drifts across them, hiding their lines, making each step uncertain. Ice glitters, dangerous beneath hooves and wheels. Travelers hunch against the wind, their cloaks stiff with frost, their faces raw. Yet even then, the paths hold life. Birds hop in hedgerows, foxes leave tracks, hares dart across whiteness. Fires glow from cottages along the way, offering warmth, offering rest. Winter slows the path, but never stills it. Stories live along the paths. A pilgrim tells of a miracle, a shepherd of a wolf chased away by dogs, a merchant of thieves scattered by guards. Children whisper of fairies, seen at twilight, of lights flickering in meadows, of voices heard in the wind. Lovers meet at crossroads, their hands clasped past, their promises whispered. Priests bless the way with holy water, marking it safe. Each traveler adds a tale, each step leaves memory behind, woven into the path long story. Pause a moment. Listen to the crunch of boots on frost, the creak of wheels in ruts, the murmur of voices, the bark of dogs, the songs of pilgrims. Smell the hedges blooming, the smoke from distant fires, the damp earth after rain. Feel the wind upon your face, the sun upon your shoulders, the weight of a basket, the pull of a cart. See the path stretch onward, winding, endless, inviting. The paths through the wild are not grand, not carved of stone, not raised monuments, yet they are lifelines, binding field to field, village to town, heart to heart. They carry work and prayer, trade and tale, sorrow and joy. To walk them is to join countless others, past and present, whose steps beat the same rhythm upon the earth. The sky falls, the last travelers hurry home, the paths rest beneath the stars, foxes prowl, owls call, frost glitters upon ruts. But with dawn, feet will tread again, voices will rise, wheels will turn. The paths are never empty, for long they wait, patient, steady, eternal, pass of fall. The wild world, a village, the manor, and the castle, lived by the turning of the year. The seasons shaped not only the fields and hearths of men, but also the rivers and forests that lay beyond. To walk into the wild was to feel the cycle more sharply, to see its signs more clearly, to be caught within its great rhythm of change. Spring arrived first in whispers, frost melted from moss, dripping steadily into clear streams. Buds swelled on branches, a faint haze of green spreading across the forest canopy. The river ran fuller, swollen with meltwater, its voice louder, more insistent, carrying twigs and leaves upon its restless surface. Birds returned, their wings flashing, their calls urgent, weaving nests in the greening branches. Children sent to gather kindling paused, their eyes lifted in wonder at the sudden abundance of sound. The air smelled sharp and fresh, of damp earth, of blossom just opening, of rain carried on wind. Wild garlic spread across the forest floor, its flowers white tea stars. Nettles thrust upward, tender enough to boil for food. Herbs stirred, long dawn offering leaves for healing, for cooking, for dyeing cloth. The wild in spring was not only beautiful but generous, giving new growth after winter famine. Women carried baskets to gather, their fingers deft, their voices lifted in soft songs of thanks. Men walked with axes to fell deadwood for fuel, paused to breathe deep the scent of greening trees. With summer, the wild grew thick and lush. The forest canopy closed, shadows deepened, the air grew heavy with heat and hum. Rivers slowed, their surfaces smooth and glassy, dragonflies darting above. Meadows blazed with flowers, poppies red, cornflowers blue, daisies white, each nodding in the warm breeze. Bees hummed, butterflies danced, crickets sang through long afternoons. People moved differently now. Hunters set out at dawn, when cool air still lingered, their dogs straining against leashes, their bows strung taut. They stepped softly through fern and bracken, eyes sharp, ears tuned to the faintest rustle. Fishermen sat in shade with lines trailing in water, patient, content to wait for a sudden tug. Children bathed in shallow pools, shrieking with delight at the cold, while washerwomen worked steadily, sweat shining upon their arms. Summer wild was abundance, yet also weariness. The sun pressed hard, insects spit relentlessly, thirst gnawed at throats. Travelers sought shade, pilgrims rested beneath wayside crosses, shepherds dozed as their flocks grazed slowly. Yet the beauty of summer was undeniable, long days stretching into star-bright nights, rivers gleaming like silver ribbons, forests alive with birdsong and whisper. Then came autumn, cloaking the wild in gold. Leaves flamed crimson, amber, and brown, drifting softly to the earth, carpeting paths and banks. The forest smelled of damp and smoke, of ripe fruit and nuts. Acorns fell thick, pigs rooting greedily, their keepers calling to them. Hazelnuts and chestnuts with earthen baskets, children hands sticky with juices, their laughter echoing among trunks. Mushrooms rose after rains, strange and many-colored, and prized for their taste, others feared for their poison. The river mirrored autumn glow, its surface gleaming bronze, its edges lined with fallen leaves. Fishermen still cast their nets, though catches grew leaner. Women threads watercress in cold shallows, their skirts wet, their hands numb but steady. Travelers wrapped cloaks tight, their breath visible in the chill. Autumn wild was both gift and warning, bounty given, but also the reminder that winter loomed. Winter stripped the wild bare, forest branches reached skyward stark and black against grey heavens. Snow lay heavy upon boughs, muffling the ground, muting the sound of footsteps. The river slowed, its edges frozen, its voice hushed. Sometimes it froze over entirely, boys sliding upon its hard surface, mothers calling warnings from the shore. The forest was quiet but not lifeless. Foxes padded softly, their tracks sharp upon snow. Owls coals in the stillness, their wings silent, their eyes bright. Deer moved cautiously, their breath steaming, their bodies lean, their hunger plain. Men carried axes to fell trees, their blows ringing sharp, their faces red with effort. Bundles of wood were dragged home, each stick a promise of warmth. For people, winter in the wild was hardship. Few ventured far, for cold bit hard, snow-blinded, wolves prowled. Yet even in winter there was beauty. The glitter of frost upon branches, the hush of falling snow, the glow of sunset across ice. Those who walked the wild then felt both small and awed, wrapped in silence, humbled by power. Through each season, the wild did not change alone. People lives turned with it. Spring brine herbs and greens, summer fish and game, autumn nuts and fruit, winter wood and silence. The rivers swelled and shrank, the forests grew and thinned, the meadows flowered and withered. Each turn of the year was written upon them, each shift shaping the rhythm of human life. Pause high a while, and let the seasons pass before your mind's eye. See the river in spring flood, hear the bees of summer, feel the crisp leaves of autumn beneath your step, taste the snowflake upon your tongue in winter, smell the blossoms, the smoke, the damp, the frost. The wild is never one thing, never still, always moving with time. The people of the Middle Ages knew this well. They feared the wild, but they also trusted it. They leaned upon its gifts, they measured its changes, they told stories to explain its mysteries. They lived not apart from it, but within it, their lives braided into its cycles, their hopes rising and falling with its turn. So the seasons turn still. The wild breathes, shifts, changes. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, each with its beauty, each with its hardship, each with its voice. To walk in the wild is to walk within this circle, to feel its steady rhythm, to know that time itself is alive. The river is not only water moving through a valley, it is a long, living home. Beneath the surface and along its edges, among reeds and stones, in shallows that flash with sun and in pools that hold their own, deep night at noon. Creatures stir and feed and rest. To stand quietly by the bank is to look upon a doorway. Most of what lives there is hidden, revealed only to patient eyes and unhurried hearts. But if we linger, the river will slowly owe itself, one small life at a time, until its quiet current seems crowded with neighbors. Begin in the shallows, light reaches the gravel, minnows flicker rear, a scatter of silver strokes that vanish one body, then reappear in a soft turn man, if a single mind commands them. Children crouch to watch, hands cup in hope, giggling when tiny bodies tickle their fingers and slip away. Sticklebacks with prickle fins guard miniature kingdoms between pebbles and weeds. If you look close, you may see a murky cloud lift and settle, just silt stirred by the fin of something small or the careful footfall of a heron. Loosen your gaze and let it widen. Water boatmen skate the surface, their legs dimpling the skin of the river, each ripple a ring expanding until it meets another and another, a language of circles. Mayflies rise like ash from an invisible fire, brief as a sigh, trembling upward to dance above the current in a swarm that looks like dust caught in sunlight. Their lives are short, but the river is patient. Beneath, their nymphs have waited for months, clinging to stones, breathing through delicate fringes until warm air and long days taught them to the wing. Children in the Middle Ages learned these rhythms early. Mayflies for May, caddis for summer, said a grandfather, pointing with a pipe stem, the river calendar written in wings. Fish fed the village and the Lord Tabe, and so the river larger shadows were known by name and habit. Trout haunt the bright riffles, speckled as if the river flung bits of sky upon their backs. They hold steady in the push of water, bodies humming against the current, then arrow forward in a blur to take a drifting fly. Eels slip like cords in the dusk, their bodies dark, their movements secret. In late summer and autumn, villagers set e-baskets in weirs and channels, and at night the lanterns along the bank glowed like fireflies, each light a hopeful watchman. Pike lurk where weeds wave long still, the river-owned spear cast and waiting. A boy with a willow pole feels a tug like fate, shouts, and the line shivers. The pike turns once and is gone, leaving only a memory and a sword to tell by the hearth. Where the river slows and widded, carp root among the reeds, stirring mud into lazy clouds. In monasteries, carp ponds adjoin the river, and monks in brown hoods scattered grain, their patient hands making a circle of ripples that the fish learned to read. Fish days came often, Fridays, fasts, long seasons of abstinence. And so fish were not only food, but a measure of time and devotion. In Lent, a woman carried a twist of dried fish home, the parcel smelling of salt and river, and thought of the thaw to come, the first green things that the water would wake. Birds write the river life in the air. The heron stands gray and tall as a pilgrim beak, long ate a knife, patience longer than any watchman. He freezes among reeds, one leg tucked, the other poised, a figure carved from mist. A quick thrust, a flash of silver, and the fish is gone. Overhead, swallows stitch the sky, sweeping low to drink on the wing, then wheeling away with a chitter and a flare of blue. In late summer, they gather on wires and willows, as if the river itself were braiding them into a quiet farewell before they ride the wind south. Kingfishers are the river, small miracles, a streak of impossible blue, a copper spark on the breast, a dot that becomes a splash, and then a feathered jewel again upon a low branch. Even in the Middle Ages, his colors were mostly earth and wool and wood smoke, eyes widened when that bright arrow crossed the day. Ducks gossip in the weeded coves, their low talk a comfort at dawn. Geese trumpet self-important sentries that wake the ferryman when strangers approach. On winter evenings, skeins of wild geese write letters across the sky, honking messages only the cold understands. At the edge where water meets meadow, a plover pipes a plaintive note that sounds the distance itself. If the day is very still, you might notice a whiskered face in the eddies and otter, slick oiled leather, eyes bright with mischief. He slides down a muddy bank just 'cause he can, belly to the world, then disappears with barely a wrinkle left behind. Fishermen call him rascal and thief, and sometimes he is both, but there is laughter in the word when the nets are full enough. Children whisper that otters carry keys to the river door, that they can open passages no boat can go. In truth, it is only their knowledge of hidden runs and reeds, learned by hunger and river sense. Still the tale warms a winter night. Beavers, when they were many, were engineers of quiet ambition, with teeth that could fell a sapling and patience that could redirect a stream. They built low dams of stick and mud, slowing water into ponds that drew insects, birds, and small fish in a crowd of gratitude. Their pelts were prized, their castoreum traded, and in many places they vanished under the weight of want. But in the memory of the river, they still work tidy busy, reshaping a ribbon of water into a necklace of pools. Monks wrote of them, hunters did too, children learned to read the telltale gnawed stump, and braided sticks is signs of unseen town. Frogs thickened the river song in spring, a chorus swollen with rain and longing. Tepals swarmed black ink spilled into the shallows, then sprouted legs and learned to breathe a second world. Toads trundled like old men across the damp paths, at night their eyes 2 coins of amber. In villages, children were told that to touch a toad brought warts, and yet you will find a child cupping one gently anyway, marveling at the soft swell of throat the toad sings without hurry. Insects make the river air move. Dragonflies patrol at bright sentries, emerald, sapphire, blood red, ate a sliver of stained glass with a predator hunger. Damselflies cling to reeds, their bodies delicate, these the lines of a scribe pen. Water striders skim, whirligigs spin, and beetles surface like bubbles, wearing armor. In summer, when the sun lies heavy, the river hums with this small industry, and even a sleepy fisherman cannot quite fall into dreams because the world is so alive around him. Listen under the bank, roots hang like the beards of old men. There, in the cool, dim crayfish creep. They raise claws in theatrical menace and then back away remembering a promise. Children flip stones to find them, shout, and the river writes a new ripple across their laughter. In deeper heats, lampreys once fastened their mouths to bigger fish, bodies a dark S in the currents. Their strange faces haunted then, folk tales and their flesh to in palates was a delicacy that tasted like the river-own iron. The creatures of the river leave signs for those who are patient. The heron track is a trident pressed into mud, a god footstep scaled down to mortal size. Otter scat smells faintly of fish and weed, laid upon a flat stone reads a note for other otters to read. The fox paw writes 4 petals of silence along the damp edge, a battered feather lodged in a reed, an empty snail shell like a tiny white horn. These are pages in a book the water keeps open. People read this book this had to. The river taught them when to set nets and when to mend them, when fish ran and when they hid in weed, when the ferry could cross and when it should wade out a flood. A ferryman felt the current with his pole and knew if there had been rain in hills he could not see. A miller listened to the pitch of water on his wheel and knew if upstream hands had stolen a board from the weir. A woman stooped to wash and smelled the faint green of algae and knew to fetch from the farther bend. This was not magic, simply attention paid with love and need. There were seasons to this life. Well, in spring, fish came fat and bold into shallows, and baskets filled with roach and dace. Eels ran in autumn, slick ropes slipping through wicker traps, and smoke houses worked long into night strings of oil-rich bodies turning gold. In high summer, when the river grew lean and slow, people turned to reeds and rushes, cutting sheaves to dry for thatch and floor, for seats and baskets, for the fine little lamps that burned a clear way through winter evenings. Reed cutters moved at grass haws through the green, their knives whispering, their bundles tossed up on banks where children stacked them into tidy walls. Sometimes the river thereth creatures not in plenty but in fear. A sudden dark of water, storm-swollen, cold, angry swept along wood and nest, fish and frog alike hurrying for shelter. Birds lifted like thrown scraps of cloth ahead of the roiling front. The ferryman heeled his boat against the bank and tied it fast twice over. After such a flood, the river left gifts a log too heavy to carry but worth returning for, with oxen a tangle of velo fit for weaving, a stranded fish flapping in a puddle to be scooped gently and set back, a small saving that warmed even a tired heart. At night, the river grew into a different hinch. Midges danced in columns that looked like ghost smoke in moonlight. Bats stitched the dusk with swift black thread, their voices high and thin, a music people could only feel at the edge of hearing. The plop of something unseen, maybe a water vole, maybe a fish too. The silence and scent rings outward to carry moonlight in soft traveling circles. Owls crossed low and silent, white faces, pale coins above the reeds. A fox came to drink, eyes twin embers for a blink, then dark again. The river went about its business beneath the stars, untroubled by the sleeping of men. Stories grew wherever creatures that a kingfisher flash might be a Saint Blue Cloak, proof that a blessing had brushed the water. An otter that carried off a fish larger than any man had seen became a tale of a river spirit testing greed. E-runs were counted the baskets were heavy, marriages would prosper, fields would bear. A pike that took a duckling under, silent as a sin, was the villain in a kitchen tale told to busy hands. None of this changed the river life, but it braided human breath into the reeds, gave winter nights a warmth that no hearth alone could keep. There were rituals, too half work, half prayer. A fisherman spat on the first knot of his net for luck, though he would laugh if pressed. A washerwoman flicked a drop of clean water to the current before she began, if bargaining for the river patience with soap. Children tied a thread of flax to a willow twig and let it flutter, a flag to hail the otter city they imagined under the bank. When a heron feather washed up, someone would tuck it behind a beam in the by, a small charm against the fever of cattle. These were not superstitions to frighten, they were courtesies, ways of speaking back to a world that was always speaking. Stand now at the ford stones Baker patient rode across. Look down between the rocks, water calms the river hair into long green ribbons, small snails graze, tiny vine buttons. A caddis larva carries its home, like a little jeweler, a coat of sand and shell stuck round the soft body chic it creeps. A mayfly nymph clings, three tails flicking, gills breathing the river. All these minute lives together make the water clean the river. Clarity is stitched by their hunger and their days. A medieval child knew this without words. The stones were slick with wood moss, and the little builders were many. Then the water would taste sweet. Upstream, the mill race sings a different note, quick and eager, while below the wheel a calmer pool gathers. Big fish hold in that shadow, and a patient man can bring home dinner with a bent pin and a crumb of bread. Downstream the ferry crooks the current, and in the eddy behind its rope, leaves and little creatures spin, a pocket universe that renews itself every hour. Even in the busiest place where buckets dip, hooves splash, voices call, the river gives space for the lives that cannot be hurried. In winter, the creatures thin and thicken in turn. Many sleep or slow frogs buried in mud, fish torpid in deep put, insects hidden in stalk and bark. But the otter fur beads water and laughs at cold. He hunts under ice by feel and whisker. The heron stands on one leg in a lace of ice, a grey monk reciting his single psalm. Ducks keep a part of the surface open with their breath and swim, a noisy counsel against the white quiet. Even now, when firewood splits with a sound-dyed bone and breath steams like prayers, the river remains company. When spring returns, you do not need a calendar to know it. The first flight of the kingfisher is a streak in your eye that your memory leaps to meet. Toads move in their hundreds across grassy shallows in a purposeful parade. Children carry two at a time, palms cupped carefully to help them reach the water. Mayflies lift into air, and the trout rise makes a sound of the popping of a tiny happy secret. Voices come back to banks if the river were a bell calling a congregation. They have not counted every neighbor in truth. The counting never ends. The river knows names we don't know, keeps lives too small for our eyes, too swift for our hands, too deep for our reach. But to stand and watch, to listen, to learn one habit or two, that is to join the neighborhood, to be admitted by the ordinary grace that the natural world extends to those who arrive quietly. Stay a little longer at the edge. The light is low now. The current is a moving mirror for a sky, the color of old pewter. Somewhere close, a fish turns with the soft has sound. A circle opens and wid and then is gone. A duck lifts and leaves wet footprints in air that vanish instantly. From the reedy dark comes a ripple that might be otter or might be only the river correcting the small homework of its surface. You don't need to name it. The knowing is not in the label but in the lingering. The reaches of the river do not ask for watch a holium and grabu silent man what grows, reaching our land free. Agonic my son, long and thine, that grows rid and one slave in kip, the sweet in conwebu. The found out is the middle out of secrets, parshets of block, but in the Gulzlit F1, the Gulzlit F1, the Gulzlit F1, the Gulzlit F1, the Gulzlit, Omen kind of makeup. The slow as naked rays advancing, the Siltobias on Salik, that of it. We beat off Britain. I bet of that. These, as I know, they guilty. I mean, that. Breathe with the river a little. Let its neighbors move round your quiet hike thoughts. You do not chase. Hear the low speech of ducks, the far whicker of a horse at the ford, the whisper of reeds, the tinkle of small stones. The current turns them, century after century. Beneath it, the long, soft voice of water. An old friend reminds you that life is many lives together, and that rest can be found simply by watching them go about their days. The forest is not only trees and shadow, it is also a kingdom of animals, large and small, fierce and gentle, hidden and bold. To step beneath its branches in the Middle Ages was to enter their world, to move through their homes, to share their paths. People hunted them, feared them, revered them, and told stories of them. And always they listened for the sounds of paws and wings, hooves and claws, for in the forest one was never truly alone. Midgen with the deer lords of the glade, they move like shadows between trunks, their bodies lean, their heads crowned with branching antlers that catch the light. In spring, they graze in meadows on tender shoots, their fawns stumbling beside them, legs long and wobbly, eyes wide. In summer, they vanish into thickets, seen only as flickers of brown, the twitch of a white tail, the crack of a branch under hoof. In autumn, their voices is the low, haunting roar of stags in rut, echoing through valleys, filling the night with a sound both wild and royal. Hunters followed them, dogs baying, horns sounding, bows strung. But even when caught, their presence remained noble, their grace remembered in story and song. Warriors lurked in the undergrowth, more feared than deer, more dangerous than wolves. Their tusks curved sharp fine knives, their bodies armored in bristle, their charges swift and furious. A hunter, armed with only spear or sword, risked much, for a wounded boar would kill in seconds. Yet their flesh was rich, their hides tough, their hunts a test of courage. Tales told of knights proving valor in the boar hunt, of peasants whispering prayers when they crossed fresh tracks in the forest, mud. The boar was both meat and myth, both prize and peril. Wolves were the forest, shadows, seldom seen, often heard. Their howls rose on winter nights, carrying far across snow and stone, raising the hairs on necks, setting dogs barking behind cottage doors. Wolves prowled for deer, for hares, for weak livestock strayed too far. To the medieval mind, they were hunger itself given form, grey shapes with eyes like lanterns, yet they were admired too, for cunning, for strength, for loyalty to their pack. Children were warned of them, saints were said to tame them, and stories told of lone travelers saved or lost in their company. The wolf lived in both fear and wonder, an animal and a symbol entwined. Foxes were smaller, slyer, yet no less vivid in memory. Their red coats flashed through hedgerows, their paws silent upon snow, their eyes bright with wit. They raided henhouses, slipped into dovecotes, vanished with a laugh into brambles. Farmers cursed them, children admired them, storytellers made them heroes and tricksters, both. Reynard the fox, sly and clever, became a figure in fave, his cunning a mirror of human folly and wisdom alike. To glimpse a fox at dusk was to see both trouble and charm, both theft and beauty, bound into one russet body. Above, the trees belonged to birds of prey. Hawks circled, their wings wide, their eyes sharp. They stooped in sudden fury, striking rabbits and pigeons, their talons swift and merciless. Lords prized them, carrying falcon on gloved hands, their hoods covering sharp eyes until the moment of flight. The falconer art was both skill and bond, a dialogue of whistle and wing. Owls ruled the night, their calls deep and haunting, their faces pale at the moon, their wings silent at thought. To hear them was to know the forest lived even in darkness, its eyes watching unseen. Smaller creatures filled the shadows too. Hares darted across paths, their ears tall, their bodies swift, their sudden leaps astonishing. In spring they boxed in meadows, standing upright, paws striking, a dance of rivalry and desire. To see a hare in moonlight was to glimpse magic, for many believed they were creatures of witches, shifters of shape. Yet they were also food, caught in snares, roasted upon spits, their speed admired even as it was defeated. Squirrels chattered in branches, their red coats bright, their tails banners of fluff. They leapt from tree to tree, carrying nuts in their mouths, burying them in soil, forgetting half, and thus planting the forest future. Children watched them with delight, laughed at their scolding cries, learned from their industry to medieval eyes. They were small lessons in diligence and play, their antics bright amid shadow. In the undergrowth, badgers dug deep burrows, their claws sharp, their bodies striped in bold black and white. They emerged at dusk, snuffling for worms, for beetles, for fruit fallen to earth. Their dens were fortresses of men chambers passed from generation to generation. Farmers disliked them for raids on crops, yet Hud admired their persistence, their stubborn hold upon the earth. A badger's strength in digging was proverbial, a reminder of labor endurance. Tiny feet all shared the soil. Mice scurried in leaf litter, their eyes gleaming, their bodies swift. Hedgehogs trundled, their spines bristling, curling into tight balls when disturbed. Children gently rolled them aside with sticks, marveling at their defense. Folk said they stole apples by carrying them on their spines, though the truth was simply hunger and pause. In such tales, the forest's smallest neighbors gained myth, grand as the largest stag. Insects to throng, beetles clicked and scuttled, ants marched in tilet lines, bees hummed through clear-in to find wild hives in hollow trunks. Butterflies flickered, petals loosed from unseen flowers, moths trembled pale at dusk. All these small lives stitched the forest together, unseen but essential, threads of life too numerous to name. In ponds and hollows, amphibians sang, frogs croaked in damp nights, toads trundled across paths, salamanders hid beneath stones, their bodies slick, their movements shy. To see one was rare, a glimpse of something half of water, half of earth, and wholly strange. Medieval minds saw them free creatures of omen, of alchemy, of mystery. Yet they were also simple lives, feeding, breeding, living their quiet cycles in shadow. People watched, listened, learned. A hunter knew the bark of a fox, the grunt of a boar, the crack of a branch beneath deer. A shepherd knew the distant howl of wolves, the wing beat of owls, the chatter of magpies warning of intruders. Children played at imitating calls, laughed at their echoes, grew into adults who knew the language of the forest, 'tis surely words. Stories rose from these creatures. Saints were said to tame wolves, to call birds to their hands, to command stags' haints, gentle companions. Witches were thought to fly owls, to whisper through foxes, to shapeshift into hares. The forest animals became symbols, strength, cunning, patience, danger, each carrying human meaning, each woven into tale and prayer. Pause Veet now, hear the bark of a fox at dusk, sharp and quick. Hear the howl of wolves, long and mournful, far across snowy hills. Hear the chatter of squirrel, the cry of hawks, the soft rustle of deer moving unseen. Smell the musk of boar, the damp of badger dens, the sharp tang of pine where birds nest. Feel the brush of fur imagined across your path, the stir of wings overhead, the echo of paws upon leaf and soil. The forest in the Middle Ages was never empty. It was peopled with creatures, was muched with trees, alive with voices that spoke in their own tongues, heard by those who listened. To walk beneath its branches was to share the world with them, to live in their company, to be humbled by their strength, delighted by their play, taught by their persistence. Still, even now in memory, the forest breathes with them. They move through shadow and light, through past and present, their lives flowing like streams between trees. The creatures of the forest remain waiting for patient eyes, rewarding those who walk slowly, who listen long, who rest and watch. Chapter 7: Wood and Water, Lifeblood. For the people of the Middle Ages, rivers and forests were not simply landscapes to look upon, not places for idle wandering or quiet admiration. They were lifeblood providers, sustainers, the deep sources from which food, shelter, warmth, and work all flowed. A castle might protect, a church might guide, a village might grow, but without wood and water, life could not last. The river began the day. At dawn, women walked its banks to fill clay pitchers, balancing them with practiced ease upon hips or shoulders. Children carried smaller buckets, splashing one another, their laughter cutting through morning mist. This water would be poured into cauldrons, into basins, into the troughs for animals. Some would be heated for bread, un for bathing, un simply for drinking, clear and cool. To live without it was unthinkable, and so the river was approached daily with both familiarity and reverence. Mills leaned upon its flow, their wheels turned endlessly, day after day, creaking and splashing, grinding grain into flour. The river current was transformed into bread on the tail, into porridge in the pot, into ale in the barrel. The miller listened to the water song like a craftsman listens to tools. He knew when the flow was strong, when it was thin, when a branch or stone had lodged against the wheel. The steady splash and thrum were constant, the heartbeat of the village. Other mills turned to different tasks. Fulling mins bound cloth, hammers raised and dropped by water strength. Iron mills, they could be afforded, worked bellows and hammers for smell and shaping. Even a small river, no more than a wide stream, could be coaxed into labor, channeled into leats and races, its course bent and guided, its energy stored in spinning wheels and rhythmic thuds. In this way, water was both servant and master. Servant to men's designs, master in its endless, unceasing movement. The forest, too, gave its gifts daily. Wood was cut in every season, though the work attained with the months. In summer, poles were cut for fencing. In autumn, great oaks felled for beams. In winter, coppiced hazard vev for kindling. Wood was never simply wood. Each tree offered something different. Oak gave strength for beams and ships. Ash, pliant and steady, made tool handles and spears, while bent easily into baskets, hazard wattle walls. Birch gave bark for kindling ewer. Long and patient offered bows, even fallen branches were prized, veth by children stacked high beside cottage walls. Fire was the daily miracle wood provided. At dawn, coals were raked, embers coaxed with breath, twigs added, then logs until flames leapt high. Pots were set to boil, bread to bake, milk to warm. In winter, families huddled close, the crackle of wood and the glow of flame their greatest comfort. Fire was not only warmth but survival. Without wood there was no fire. Without fire, no meal, no light, no comfort against the night. Wood built the very homes people lived in. Wattle and daub walls, hazel rods, woven tight, smeared with clay and straw formed, the cottages of peasants. Oak beams rose to frame halls, carved with care, pegged with wooden pins, joints snug and lasting. Shingles split from trees, roofed chapels, barns, and inns. Doors were thick planks banded with iron, floors strewn with rushes or planked with sturdy boards. Everywhere the touch of the forest remained, shaped by hand, softened by time, it never fully divorced from the tree. Bridges spanned rivers with beams of oak and ash, their posts driven deep into mud, their surfaces worn by wheels and hooves. Without them, travelers depended on ferry or fords. With them, markets flourished. Towns grew. Pilgrims passed. Each bridge was both wood and water joined, each crossing a symbol of the bond between resource and need. Ships and boats, too, were born of the forest, set afloat upon water. Flat bottom and ferry carried carts across rivers. Fishing boats slipped into currents with nets trailing. Trading vessels hugged coasts and estuaries. Their ribs were oak, their planks pine, their caulking tar and pitch. Men trusted wood to float upon water, to carry them, their goods and their hopes across distance, and so wood and water together became travel, connection, possibility. Even tools for work returned to these gifts. Plows were wood-shod with iron, hoes with wooden handles, spindles carved from smooth branches, bows were shaped from yew, arrows fletched with goose feathers, shafts straightened from ash. Barras were staves of oak, bound with iron hoops, buckets curved from smaller boards, wheels made of elm hubs and oak spokes. Every craft began with the forest, every vessel with the river, every trade with the shaping of what wood and water gave. There was reverence, too, in their things. Springs were blessed, wells hallowed, water crossed with the sign of faith before drinking. Rivers bore processions, holy statues carried along their banks, prayers sung to sanctify their flow. In dry summers, priests walked to their edges, casting relics or holy water into the stream, begging rain, pleading fertility for fields. The forest was seen ends both danger and sanctuary. Hermits withdrew into its depths for prayer. Monks planted cloisters with trees for shade, while villagers spoke of spirits dwelling in groves, saints taming wolves, and fairies dancing in glades. To cut a great oak was sometimes an act of both need and trembling, for who knew what spirit watched from its branches? Season by season, the lifeblood pulsed. In spring, water swelled with thaw, turning wheels strong, feeding fields. Coppice trees sprouted fresh shoots, straight and supple, ready for harvest years ahead. In summer, rivers slowed but grew rich with fish, forests thickened with shade and fruit. Autumn filled barns with timber and streams with rushing rain. Winter demanded fuel, great stacks of logs cut and dried, hauled from forest to hearth. The rhythm never ended, only turned, and steadied the river as patient ed the oak. Pause I, and see with me. A woman kneels at the bank, scooping water into a pitcher, her child balancing a smaller jug beside her. A man carries a bundle of hazard rods upon his back, his axe hanging from his belt. The mill wheel turns steadily, splashing droplets into sunlight, its creak like a slow heartbeat. A cottage stands sturdy, its beams dark with smoke, its walls of clay and wattle strong against weather. A fire burns, wood crackling, water hissing in an iron pot, the scent of barley rising. All this, life itself, made from wood and water. In the medieval world, these were not luxuries, not decorations, not mere scenery. They were foundation, sustenance, rhythm, necessity. They were lifeblood in every drop, in every grain, in every stick and beam. The wild gave itself, and people gave back with labor, prayer, and story. The river gave life, but it also gave story. In the Middle Ages, no stream was old water, no pool only depth. Each bend might hold a tale, each ford a memory, each spring a whisper of something more than ordinary. The people who lived beside rivers drank not only from their flow, but from the well of story that death around them. Begin with the saints and their miracles. In villages across Europe, people told of holy men and women who blessed rivers, crossed them dry-shod, or drew healing from their waters. One tale told of Saint Christopher, the giant who carried travelers across a dangerous stream, until one day he bore the Christ child himself, the boy growing heavy, the world upon his shoulders. From then on, Christopher was remembered then patron of all who crossed waters, his image carved into chapel walls near fords and bridges. Travelers made the sign of the cross at his site, murmuring a prayer before stepping onto ferries or into streams. Other saints made rivers safe. Saint Nicholas, known for his kindness to sailors, was said to calm storms and guide boats to harbor. In Ireland and Wales, holy wells dedicated to saints bubbled from springs, their waters thought to cure sickness, to bring fertility, to bless the faithful. Pilgrims knelt, cupping the water in their hands, pressing it to their lips, believing the saint presence flowed within it. There were also stories of spirits, water-maided nixies and nymphs who dwelled in pools and bends. In Germany, the Lorelei sang from rocks above the Rhine, her voice so sweet that sailors forgot their oars and wrecked upon hidden shoals. In Celtic lands, selkies were whispered of seals who shed their skins to walk the men or women upon the shore. If their skin was stolen, they were bound to land, their longing for the sea never stilled. Children huddled close by hearths to hear such tales, their eyes wide, the river outside suddenly more alive, more mysterious. Rivers also carried fears and warnings. Drowned souls, it was said, lingered in deep pools, pulling the unwary beneath. Some believed strange lights flickered above marshes, leading travelers astray into bogs. Ferrymen told of sea shapes in the mist, figures walking wade no man could walk. fading when hailed. Were they saints? Were they spirits? Were they memories? None could say, but the tales endured, retold on long nights as water murmured outside darkened doors. The monsters of water held a place in legend too. Dragons, was said, lurked in lakes and rivers, coiling beneath the surface, their breath souring the air, their hunger endless. In England, tales of the Lambton worm told of a monstrous serpent pulled from a river by unlucky youth, cast aside and grown terrible with time, until it wrapped itself about hill and village. Heroes rose in these stories' nights, with shining swords, saints with prayer and cross-facing beasts that were more than scales and teeth. They were the embodiment of fear, of flood, of famine, of the deep unknown. In quieter tales, the river itself was personified. People spoke of it if it breathed, if it felt. A spring might be called Mother Well, a stream the old one brook. Offerers were made, bread cast upon water, flowers laid at springs, small gifts in return for life received. Even when Christian faith spread, these habits endured, folded into prayers to saints, blended into blessings. The river remained more than substance. Then is verive podsnais, verive by podignans alum. Even Saul is sadden for actual a gonful mites. I am the word about impels one bad load. He was present. There were also lessons woven into river tales, a story told of a farmer who mocked the water, saying it flowed too slow. The next season, floods rose, washing away his crops, and villagers nodded, saying the river had answered his scorn. Another tale told of a ferryman who cheated pilgrims, charging too much. One day he carried a cloaked stranger who revealed himself a saint, cursing the man until his boat rotted beneath him. Such stories were not only entertainment, but instruction, reminding all who heard that water deserved respect, honesty, humility. Children grew up with rhymes and charms tied to rivers. Cast your pebble, count to 3, watch the rings and luck you'll see, they chanted as they threw stones. Girls wove daisy chains and set them to float, wondering which direction their future husbands might come from. Boys dared one another to leap narrow streams, claiming the bravest would grow into strong men. In this way, play itself became a kind of folk ritual, binding the next generation to the old rhythms. Even the sounds of the river gained meaning. The rush of water in spring floods was thought to be the voices of the dead, crying warnings. The gurgle of a brook was said to be fairies laughing. The stillness of a pond on a windlit day was seen ominous, as though something below waited to stir. These interpretations shaped how people moved through the world with caution, with reverence, with imagination sharpened by need. At dusk, when mist rose, the river was at its most mysterious. Shadows blurred, lights softened, reflections shimmered into ghostly doubles. Ferrymen carried lanterns that seemed tiny against the vastness of dark water. Travelers paused, uncertain, murmuring prayers before stepping into boats. It was then, perhaps, that legends grew strongest, for the night makes every ripple larger, every sound deeper, every movement more uncanny. Yet the river was also a comfort. Mothers told children stories of saints calming storms, of holy wells healing wounds, of water itself blessed by God at creation. These tales soothed fear, gave hope, made the river a place not only of danger but of grace. The cross was traced upon the surface, the Our Father murmured before drinking, a coin dropped in thanks when healing was sought. Pause with BB by the bank at twilight. The air is cool, the mist rising. Hear the steady rush of water, the croak of frogs, the flap of wings. Imagine the stories told thee of saints, of spirits, of monsters, of miracles. Feel the way the river invites both fear and faith, both wonder and caution, for in the Middle Ages every ripple carried meaning, every current carried story. So the river was more than water. It was legend, it was lesson, it was memory. To drink from it was to sip from story to cross. It was to walk through myth, to live by. It was to dwell with saints and spirits alike. The river flowed, and with it flowed the imagination of a people. If rivers carried stories in their depths, forests carried them in their shadows. Every tree, every clearing, every path winding into dimness held the weight of tale and warning. To step beneath the boughs was to enter not only the realm of animals and leaves, but the living tapestry of legend. The forest was both feared and cherished, both sacred and forbidden, both shelter and snare. Many spoke of the Green Man, a spirit of leaves and life. His face, they said, could be glimpsed carved upon church corbels and doorways, staring out through oak leaves and ivy. But in the forest his presence was wilder. Some claimed to see a figure, half man, half tree, slipping between trunks, his body clad in green, his beard a tangle of vines, his eyes deep in mossy pools. He was no deem nor saint, but something older, a guardian of growth, a reminder that men were guests in the forest, not its masters. Farmers would nod respectfully when felling great oaks, whispering that the Green Man watched, weighing their care. Other stories told of fairies, small folk of glades and hollows, who danced in rings by moonlight. Children were warned not to step into circles of mushrooms, for they were said to be the paths of fairy revels. To do so was to risk being drawn away, lost for hours or days or years, returning home to find a generation past. Yet there were gentleman tales too of fairies leaving gifts of milk or honey, of helping a poor woman gather wood, of leading a lost child safely to a path. Folk left offerings of bread or cream at the edge of Clearian, simple tokens of goodwill, a small hedge against mischief. Not on spirits of the forest were kind. Witches were said to dwell in deep huts, stirring cauldrons, whispering curses. Travelers feared stumbling upon their dwellings, with smoke curled oddly and herbs dried in bundles no Christian priest would bless. Hares seen darting from such places were thought to be witches in disguise, shape-shifting to move unseen. Tales told of owls carrying voices, of foxes with eyes too clever, of wolves bound to witches' will. Children learned to cross themselves when shadows deepened, to murmur prayers when alone in the wood. There were also hermits, holy men who withdrew into the forest to seek God in solitude. Their lives too fed legend. Pilgrims spoke of meeting ragged figures who offered blessings, of hearing chants in lonely glades, of stumbling upon chapels built from branches and stone. Some hermits were remembered dead saints, taming wild beasts with their calm, speaking gently to wolves, calling birds to rest upon their shoulders. The forest made their holiness visible, their communion with creatures proof of their closeness to heaven. Hunters' tales carried their own weight. A man who followed a stag too far might vanish, never to return. Some said the stag was enchanted, leading him deeper and deeper until he crossed into another world. Others said it was punishment for greed, for hunting on a holy day, for failing to share meat with the poor. Dogs were said to bay at unseen things, their hackles rising though no quarry was in sight. Hunts in such places carried risk beyond tusks and hooves, risk of losing oneself to the forest, endless labyrinth. In winter, When nights grew long, villagers told of phantom hunts. The wild hunt, it was half in menlands. A ghostly host of riders, led by a dark figure, swept through the sky above forests, their horns blowing, their hounds baying. To hear them was to shiver, for it meant death was near, or war or famine. Some said the leader was a fallen king, others the devil himself, others a god older than Christ, still roaming with his hunters. People shut doors tight on such nights, praying that the hunt would pass them by. Trees themselves held legend. An oak might be said to house a spirit, a yew to guard the dead, a willow to weep for the lost. Certain groves were avoided, not for any clear reason, but for the weight of silence, the sense of presence. Others were sacred places of meeting, we villagers there for judgment or festival. Their lives rooted in the same soil lay the trees. To cut wood from such places without cause was to invite ill luck, to anger the unseen. And so people lived in a quiet balance, shaping the forest but also shaped by it, fearing its mysteries even as they relied upon its gifts. The forest was also a place of enchantment and transformation. Tales told of knights who entered woods and met maidens who were not what they seemed, women cursed into animal forms, or spirits testing courage. A man might kiss a frog and find her turn to a lady, though in most stories it was a warning rather than a promise. Beasts that spoke, birds that gave counsel, trees that walked, these were not thought impossible, for the forest was a place where boundaries blurred, where the ordinary world thinned. Even sounds in the night grew into story. The creak of a branch in wind was said to be whispering voices. The sudden snap of a twig beneath hoof or paw became a warning of spirits passing. The moan of trees in storm gusts became lament of lost souls. To walk in the forest after dark was to hear 100 voices, none of them human, yet each pressing upon the mind. The wise did not linger, but quickened their steps, murmuring prayers until hearthlight greeted them. Yet not all tales were fearful. The forest all held beauty and kindness. Children spoke of birds guiding them home, of squirrel dropping nuts before them, of deer paws if to show a path. Lovers carved hearts into bark, believing the tree would bless their union. Old folk told of dreams had in the forest that later came true, messages from God perhaps, or from the trees themselves. Even in superstition there was wonder, a recognition that the forest was alive, not empty. Pause now, and listen they once did. Hear the faint laughter of unseen fairies in rustling leaves. Hear the baying of ghostly hounds far in the sky. Hear the whisper of trees leaning in wind, the flap of a dull wing, the snap of a twig just beyond sight. Smell the damp earth, the moss, the smoke of a hermit fire, the sharpness of herbs hanging to dry. Feel the weight of the unseen, the presence of something larger, older, watching. The forest in the Middle Ages was never only trees and soil. It was legend made solid, a realm of spirits and saints, witches and wonders, beasts and blessings. People entered it with caution, told stories of it with awe, and carried its mysteries home in memory. In their tales, the forest was both danger and sanctuary, both threat and gift, both shadow and light. Those stories were told by hearthsides, whispered to children, sung in halls, carved into stone. The forest itself listened, its branches swaying, its leaves rustling, its roots deep as time. For legend was not separate from the forest. It was the forest, alive in human breath, eternal as the trees themselves. Not every encounter with the wild was work or fear or story. Sometimes it was simply presence, quiet, unhurried, the soul resting in the company of water and wood. For the people of the Middle Ages, who lab long and lived close to necessity, these moments of stillness may have been rare, yet when they came, they lingered in memory, warming hearts in winter, softening toil with recollection. And for us, looking back, they open a window into how the medieval world found beauty in the simplest of places. Picture a traveler pause by a stream, has walked since dawn, his pack heavy, his sandals worn. The path led him through hedgerows, buzzing with bees, across meadows shimmering with heat, until he reached this crossing where the water runs clear over smooth stones. He kneels, cupping his hands, drinking deeply, the coolness shocking and sweet upon his tongue. He splashes his face, wipes his brow, then sits upon a mossy rock to watch the water play. For a moment, the weariness leaves him. He listens to the chuckle of the current, the calls of birds overhead, the wind combing the grass. The journey is long, but here at the stream he finds a pause, a peace, a small gift freely given. Or imagine a woman resting in a forest glade. Her basket is half filled with herb sage and mint, nettle and camphor, gathered for kitchen and healing. The air is warm, the sun falls in patches through leaves, and she sets down her load to lean against the trunk of airy oak. Her eyes close. She breathes in the scent of earth and green things, the sweetness of crushed mint upon her fingers. Insects hum, a wood pigeon coos, the world slows. For a few breaths she is not laborer, not wife, not mother, only a soul among trees, sharing silence with the forest. Children found wonder everywhere. A boy and girl chase one another through a meadow at dusk, their hands brushing tall grasses that glow golden in the fading light. They fall breathless, gazing upward, and see the first star prick the sky. That one is mine, says the boy, pointing. That one is mine, says the girl, claiming another. They laugh, and in their laughter the meadow holds a memory of joy, or a group of children gather at the edge of a pond, watching frogs leap from lily to bank, squealing as tadpoles dart. They dip sticks into water, fish for shadows, invent kingdoms beneath the surface. The pond becomes a mirror of their imagination, alive because they are alive within it. Monks too sought wonder in stillness. Within Cloister Arden they walked slowly, murmuring prayers, their sandals whispering upon stone. But beyond walls, wandered into wild meadows, where flowers nodded and bees zed. There they sat, reading psalms, their voices blending with birdsong, their hearts tuned to the rhythm of creation. For them, every breeze was breath of God, every leaf a verse, every stream a hymn. The wild was not threat, but scripture, a book written in green and water, open to all who pause to read. Even hunters, in their pursuit of quarry, sometimes found themselves stilled. A man waits in shadow, bow red, eyes sharp for movement. But minutes pass into hours, his gaze shifts. He notices the way light pours through leaves, the way ferns curl in tight spirals, the way a beetle climbs tirelessly up a stalk. He lowers his bow, for the forest itself has become his quarry. A catch of beauty, a harvest of silence. The deer may escape today, but he carries home a memory worth their much and meat. At times, quiet wonder came in sounds, the long, low call of owl at midnight, the gurgle of water slipping beneath ice in winter, the rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze no one felt upon their cheek, the distant roar of stags in autumn. Each sound was a reminder of life beyond the self, a voice that said, "You are not alone, you are part of something vast, something unending." At times it came in sights, moonlight silvering a river until it seemed made of glass, mist rising from meadows in early morning, curling on cattle like a veil, a rainbow bent above a waterfall, each color trembling, impossible and yet present. Such sights were fleeting, but they carried weight. A man might recall the arc of that rainbow years later, ere he sat by the fire. A woman might smile at the memory of mist curling about her skirts as she read the herbs. Wonder left traces like footprints on the heart. In every season, moments waited. In spring, a shepherd paused to watch lambs leap and tumble, their joy like sparks of light. In summer, a ferryman resting at dusk, his pole still, watching swallows dive. In autumn, a child kicking through piles of fallen leaves, the air rich with their scent, her laughter rising V's bright that the color run her. In winter, a family standing outside at night, marveling at the hush of snow, the world stilled, their breath rising like prayers into a sky jeweled with stars. Such moments were not rare, only rarely lady, for the wild gave them freely again and then to all who paused, to linger beside a river, to walk slowly beneath trees, to sit upon a stone and watch clouds drift. These were gifts that cost nothing, yet they enriched lives beyond measure. Pause now, yourself. Imagine sitting upon a fallen log, your back to its rough bark, your eyes lifted to a canopy of leaves. Shafts of light fall like ladders from sky to earth. A butterfly drifts past, its wings the color of flame. The air smells of pine, of soil, of sun-warmed bark. Your body grows still, your breath deep pit, the forest cradles you. Or imagine yourself upon the bank of a river at night. The water murmurs, stars shimmer, the cool air brushes your face. You are alone, but not lonely, for the wild is with you. For medieval people, for us, these moments mattered. They reminded them that life was not only labor and fear, hunger and toil, but also beauty, quiet, wonder. They gave strength, they soothed sorrow, they drew hearts close to the mystery of creation. They were prayers without words, blessings without priests, sacraments given by earth and sky. In truth, these moments still remain. The river still murmurs, the forest still whispers, the meadow still glows at dusk. The wild still offers wonder to all who will pause, who will listen, who will rest. The wild was never only backdrop. To those who lived in the Middle Ages, it was a teacher, a guide, a mirror of truths too large to be written in books alone. Every river, every tree, every bird and beast carried lessons if one had the patience to watch and the humility to listen. And though people feared its dangers, they also drew wisdom from its rhythms, shaping their lives by what the land revealed. The river taught patience. Its current never hurried, yet it never ceased. Day after day it flowed onward through frost, through flood, through calm. Fishermen learned to wait with it, nets spread, lines set, knowing that haste wrote nothing, but patience filled the basket. The miller learned that he could not command its flow, only guide it, shaping races and channels, but never the river itself. Mothers drawing water at dawn knew that though their pitchers emptied each day, the river would be full again tomorrow. It whispered the truth that persistence, not speed, carries life forward. The rivers, the forest taught resilience. Winter stripped it bare, winds tore branches, axes felled trees, yet spring always returned. Shoots rose from stumps, saplings reached toward light, leaves unfolded, blossoms burst. To see coppice regrow, to see acorns sprout into saplings, was to learn that loss was not the end. Woodcutters knew it, Shepherds resting in glades knew it. Children gathering nuts knew it. The forest gave itself, yet renewed itself, teaching that life bends, breaks, and rises again. Animals, too, were teachers. The wolf taught loyalty and cooperation. Though feared, his howl was also admired, a signal to his pack, a reminder that survival came not through solitude but through fellowship. The fox taught cleverness, his sly raids a lesson in wit over strength. The bee, buzzing among flowers, taught diligence, each small flight a thread in the honeycomb of survival. The deer taught grace, the boar courage, the owl watchfulness, the hare quickness, the ox endurance. Each creature, in its way, embodied virtues and cautions, shaping the stories and morals told by firelight. Even the smallest beings had lessons. The ant, marching tirelessly, reminded villagers of the value of storing for winter. The butterfly, fragile and short-lived, reminded them of the brevet of life, yet also its beauty. The froggy, shifting from tadpole to leaper, showed transformation, a sign of change inevitable and good. For a people with few books, the world itself was scripture, each life a letter in its great text. The seasons were teachers. Well, spring fern after hardship taught hope, that hunger and cold did not last forever. Summer fullness taught gratitude, reminding all to rejoice while plenty was at hand. Autumn taught preparation, urging barns to be filled, wood to be stacked, food to be salted and stored. Winter taught endurance, that trials cannot be hurried, only borne with patience until change returns. The rhythm of the year became a rhythm of the heart, a catechism written in frost and blossom, in ripening grain and falling leaf. Silence itself was a teacher in the wild. In a glade at dusk, when birds quieted, when only the soft tread of a deer passed, silence pressed close, and within it thought grew clearer. Hermits sought it deliberately, withdrawing from clamor to listen to what only silence could say. But even shepherds upon lonely hills, even washerwomen at riverside before dawn knew its lesson, that within quiet lay peace, that within stillness lay strength. The wild also taught humility. A storm sweeping through a forest reminded men that strength was not theirs alone. A flood washing over fields showed that labor could be undone in an instant. A wolf howl across snow reminded villagers that they were not the only hunters, not the only lives striving in hunger. The wild was larger, older, stronger than human will, and to live well was to live within it, not against it. At the same time, the wild taught generosity. Rivers flowed whether thanked or not. Trees bore fruit whether blessed or not. Birds sang whether heard or not. The world gave over and then, not asking but offering. This generosity was woven into prayers of gratitude, into customs of leaving gifts at wells, of blessing harvests, of raising chapels where springs bubbled. People recognized the grace of being sustained, and in their way they gave thanks. Children grew up in this cool without walls. They learned not from parchment, but from fields and woods. A boy chasing rabbits learned swiftness and failure. A girl gathering herbs learned names, scents, and healing. Their lessons were in mud upon shoes, scratches from brambles, baskets of berries carried home, the sting of nettles, the taste of honeycomb, the warmth of a fire kindled from dead sticks. These lessons shaped not only skills but souls, grounding them in the truth that life was shared with the wild, not separate from it. Stories carried these teachings forward. The fox in Fevet taught cunning, the lion known from hearsay or bestiaries taught nobility, the bee taught community, parables borrowed from nature, because people already knew their lessons in marrow and breath. To speak of sowing and reaping was to speak in familiar terms. To liken prayer to water flowing was to tie heaven to earth in a language all but understand. Pause ye and listen. Hear the river a steady murmur, teaching patience. Hear the wind in trees, teaching resilience. Hear the howl of wolves, the buzz of bees, the call of owls, each carrying its own lesson. Smell the damp earth, reminding of renewal. Feel the chill of frost, teaching endurance. The wild is a school without masters, yet it teaches all who live within it. For medieval people, these lessons were not abstract. They were daily, pressing, urgent. To ignore them was to go hungry, to freeze, to fall ill. To heed them was to survive, to flourish, to endure. But beyond survival, they offered meaning. They shaped imagination, story, prayer, song. They made life richer, deeper, more connected. So the wild remains teacher still, for us, or for them. It shows patience in rivers, resilience in trees, loyalty in wolves, diligence in bees. It reminds us to prepare with autumn, to endure with winter, to rejoice with summer, to hope with spring. It whispers humility in storm, generosity in blossom, peace in silence. If we pause, if we listen, if we rest among rivers and forests, we may hear it still. The wild does not cease to teach, nor do we cease to need its lessons. Its voice is older than ours, yet always new, always waiting for ears willing to hear. And day fades and the wild changes. The sun lowers, the last light sliding along branches, catching on ripples, gilding the tips of grass. Shadows stretch, cool air gathers, and the voices of the day fall silent, one by one. The river soft-fed its song, the forest draws its cloak tighter, the meadow folds itself into stillness. And in this hush, the world of night awakens. At the river edge, the surface darkened from silver to black, a mirror for stars not yet revealed. A frog croaks loud and sudden, answered by another across the water. Midges rise in swaying columns, bats swoop silently, their wings brushing the night like strokes of a soft brush. Fish rise with faint plops, circles widening on the dark water before vanishing into quiet again. The ferryman ties his boat fast, his lantern glowing small and warm, then walks homeward, leaving the river to its own companions, the owls, the insects, the drifting mist. In the forest, dusk thickens faster. Under the canopy, light dims long before the sky. Darkened birds sell, their songs trailing into silence, each nest a hush of feathers. A fox stirs, slipping from den, paws sound-led upon leaf litter. Deer move like shadows, careful, wary, stepping lightly through undergrowth. An owl glides, wings wide, eyes shining pale, a hunter of the silent hours. The trees creak softly as the night breeze arrives, and the forest breathes in deeper rhythm, slower, heavier, more secret. In the meadow, crickets sing their chorus, steady and endless, a hum that fills the dark. Fireflies wink in patterns that seem like hidden messages, drifting close, then fading. Cattle lie down in fields, their bodies dark shapes against starlight. Sheep gather close, bells quiet, only the faint sound of breathing carrying through the cool night air. The meadow day of buzz and brightness is gone. Now it is a place of rest, of stillness beneath the sky. Above all, the stars emerge. First one, then another, then a scatter, then a flood. The Milky Way arches overhead, a river of light mirroring the rivers below. To medieval eyes, it was the road of souls, the pathway to heaven, the bridge across night. Travelers lifted their eyes, recognizing Constellan, telling stories of hunters and bears, of heroes and saints traced in stars. Children whispered, pointing upward, each star a candle, each spark a mystery. The wild lay beneath a sky both vast and intimate, both eternal and near. Night in the wild was not empty, but it was gentle. The river whispered instead of rushing. The forest rustled instead of roaring. The meadow hummed instead of buzzing. Life moved, but slower, softer, with care. Those who walked at night stepped cautiously, lanterns in hand, listening for sounds hoof on path, paw in leaves, wing overhead. And yet, for all its mystery, the night gave peace. It wrapped the world in coolness, folded work away, allowed rest to grow. Imagine now a pilgrim lying beside a river, his cloak pulled close, his staff at hand. He gazes at stars, hears the murmur of water, feels the earth steady beneath him. His feet ache, his back is weary, but the wild gives him lullaby, or a shepherd resting against a tree, his flock nearby, his dog curled at his side. He listens to crickets, watches fireflies, and feels no fear, for the night is familiar, a companion, not a foe. Even in villages, people felt this nearness. From cottage windows they could hear the river hush, the owl call, the wind in trees. The wild was never far, its voice seeped through thatch and shutter, its breath drifted in with smoke from the hearth. Children fell asleep to its sounds, dreams, carrying them into glades and streams, into paths and stars. The night, even unseen, wrapped itself around them. The wild bye-bye also invited prayer and thought. Monks rose for vigils, their chants echoing like low rivers in stone halls, voices lifted, stars lifted above. Travelers knelt before sleep, murmuring words to saints for safety. Farmers thanked God for the day work, asked blessing for the morrow, and always the wild seemed part of this prayer. The silence itself a hymn, the stars a choir, the river a psalm that never ceased. Pause vive. Close your eyes. Imagine the night wrapping you, Mizat, wrap them, the cool air against your skin, the sound of a river steady, endless, the rustle of leaves shifting in breeze, the faint hoot of owl, the murmur of unseen wings. Above, stars wheeling, slow, eternal, the world vast, but also close, intimate, sheltering. In the Middle Ages, to live was to live with the wild day and by die, to wake to its light, to labor with its gifts, to fear and respect its power, to rest in its hush. Night was part of that rhythm, part of that lesson, part of that endless circle of life given and received. So this journey through rivers, forests, and wild places draws to a close. Let the night settle gently. Let the river song lull you. Let the forest breath steady you. Let the stars guide you into dreams. You are safe, you are held, you are part of the same circle that bound their lives, that still binds ours. The river flows, the forest stands, the stars shine, night deep, pit, rest comes.